Tonight, we will go on a journey together through ancient stories. Stories of ordinary people who discovered something extraordinary. Not through great effort or special abilities, but through moments of seeing clearly. Through learning to let life be as it is. Before we begin, feel free to share what time it is and where you're listening from. As these tales unfold tonight, you may notice something shifting. Your breath becoming slower. Your body releasing tension you did not know you were holding. Your mind growing quieter. This is the gift of Zen Buddhism. It does not ask you to become someone different. It simply invites you to recognize what you already are, to see through the illusions that create struggle, to rest in the peace that is always here, always available, always home. So settle now, completely. Let your body grow heavy and still. There is nowhere else to be. Just this moment. Just this breath. Just these words finding their way to you. Let us begin this journey together. In a village where clay was abundant and the river ran clear, there lived a potter named June. He had learned his craft from his father, who had learned from his father before him. 3 generations of hands shaping clay into vessels. 3 generations of knowing how fire transforms earth into something useful and beautiful. June's workshop sat at the edge of the village, a simple building with a large kiln that glowed red on firing days. The wheel where he worked stood by the window, positioned to catch the morning light. He had thrown thousands of bowls on that wheel. He took pride in his work. Not the boastful kind of pride, but the quiet satisfaction of someone who does something well. People came from neighboring villages to buy his pieces, knowing they would receive something that would last. But lately, June had been feeling restless. His work had become routine. Each bowl looked like the one before it. Competent, yes. Well made, certainly. But something was missing. Some quality he could not name. Some life that had been present in his earlier work but had faded with time. He decided to create something different. Something that would challenge him. He would make a single bowl. Not for sale. Not for use. Just for the making itself. He would pour all his skill and attention into this one piece. Make it the finest work he had ever produced. A bowl that would prove to himself that he had not lost whatever spark had once animated his hands. He chose his clay carefully, wedged it thoroughly to remove air bubbles. Let it rest for days until it reached the perfect consistency. When he finally sat down at his wheel, he brought a quality of attention he rarely allowed himself anymore. He was not making just another bowl. He was making the bowl. The one that would justify all the years of practice. All the hours of repetition. All the discipline of his craft. The bowl took shape under his hands. The walls rose evenly. The curve emerged exactly as he envisioned it. His fingers moved with confidence born from 10,000 similar movements. But this time, there was something else. A kind of conversation between his hands and the clay. The clay seemed to respond differently, to want to become this particular form. He trimmed it the next day with equal care. Each cut of the trimming tool precise. The foot ring perfectly centered. The thickness of the walls exactly right. Not so thin that they would be fragile. Not so thick that the bowl would feel heavy. Everything balanced. Everything considered. The bowl dried slowly, covered with cloth so it would not crack. June checked it several times each day. When it was leather hard, he applied the glaze. A simple ash glaze that he had mixed himself. Nothing fancy. He wanted the form itself to speak, not some elaborate decoration. The firing took 2 days. June tended the kiln personally, adjusting the temperature, watching the flame, feeling the heat. This was always the moment of vulnerability. No matter how skilled the potter, the fire had its own will. Sometimes pieces cracked. Sometimes glazes ran or bubbled. Sometimes something unpredictable happened in the heat and darkness of the kiln. When the kiln finally cooled enough to open, June waited. He made himself attend to other tasks. Swept the workshop, organized his tools, prepared clay for his next project. But his attention kept returning to the kiln, to the bowl waiting inside. Finally, he could wait no longer. He opened the kiln door. The heat, still radiating from the interior, made him step back. But through the shimmering air, he could see the bowl. It sat on the middle shelf exactly where he had placed it. The color of the glaze looked good. The form appeared intact. He waited another hour for it to cool completely. Then, with hands that trembled slightly, he reached in and lifted the bowl out. It was beautiful. More beautiful than he had imagined. The glaze had broken in all the right places, creating subtle variations in color. The form was perfect. The weight in his hands felt exactly right. He turned it slowly, examining every curve, every surface. It was flawless. The finest thing he had ever made. He set it on his work table and stepped back to look at it properly. The morning light fell across its surface. The bowl seemed to glow from within, as if it had absorbed something of the fire that had transformed it. June felt a surge of satisfaction. He had done it. After all these years, he had finally created something truly exceptional. He walked around the table, viewing the bowl from different angles. And then he saw it. A crack. Thin as a hair but unmistakable. It ran from the rim down about 2 inches, then disappeared into the curve of the wall. June's hands went cold. He picked up the bowl, held it close to his face. Yes, there it was. A flaw. Not in the making. Not in the glazing. Something that had happened in the firing. A stress crack. Invisible until this moment. But now that he saw it, he could see nothing else. The bowl was ruined. All that care. All that attention. All that hope of creating something perfect. Destroyed by this single thin line that split the surface. He set the bowl down, afraid his hands might betray him and drop it. Better broken completely than existing in this state. Neither perfect nor obviously flawed. Just damaged. Diminished. A failure. He sat heavily on his stool, staring at the bowl. The crack seemed to mock him. All his skill meant nothing if the fire could undo it. All his attention meant nothing if something beyond his control could destroy his work. That afternoon, his old teacher came to visit. Master Hideo was nearly 80 now, his hands too bent with age to throw pots anymore, but his eyes still sharp. He visited June once each season, more out of friendship than any need to check on his former students' work. He saw the bowl immediately. Saw too the look on June's face. "Show me," Hideo said simply. June brought the bowl to him, pointed out the crack, waited for the old master's judgment. Hideo held the bowl in his weathered hands, turned it slowly, examined it from every angle. Then he looked at June with an expression that was hard to read. "Tell me what you see when you look at this bowl," Hideo said. "I see a flaw," June replied. "I see my finest work ruined by something I could not control." "Look again." June looked. The crack was still there, still obvious, still destroying the perfection he had worked so hard to achieve. "I see the same thing," he said quietly. Hideo set the bowl on the table between them. "Then you are not seeing clearly. You are seeing only what you expected, what you planned, what you tried to control. You are not seeing what is actually here." He pointed to the crack. "This line, did you make it?" "No. It happened in the firing. Something I could not control." "Yes. Something you could not control. And yet it is here, part of this bowl now. Not separate from the bowl, but integrated into it. The bowl includes this crack. This is what the bowl is. Not what you intended, but what emerged." June felt frustration rising. "But it ruins the bowl. It destroys what could have been perfect." "Perfect," Hideo repeated softly. "What is perfect? Something that matches your plan exactly? Something that conforms completely to your intention? Is that perfection? Or is that just control?" He picked up the bowl again, holding it to the light. The crack caught the sunlight, creating a subtle line of shadow and brightness. "Look at how the light moves along this line. Look at how it adds something to the form. A kind of movement, a kind of life. The bowl is no longer static. It has a story now. Something happened to it. It bears the mark of that happening. But it will leak," June said. "It cannot hold water. It has no function." "Cannot hold water," Hideo agreed. "So it will not be a water bowl. It will be something else. It will hold flowers, perhaps. Or sit empty, beautiful in its emptiness. Or it will simply exist as a reminder that nothing turns out exactly as planned. That life includes the uncontrolled. That perfection is not the same as control." He set the bowl down gently. "June, you have spent years learning to control your craft, to make what you intend. This is valuable. This is skill. But now you must learn something else. You must learn to accept what emerges that you did not intend. To see beauty in what you did not plan. To recognize that the fire has wisdom too. That the clay has its own nature. That not everything is yours to determine." June sat with these words. They did not comfort him. They challenged him. He had built his identity as a potter on his ability to control outcomes, to make what he envisioned, to have his hands create what his mind conceived. And now his teacher was suggesting that this very ability was somehow limiting him. "For years I have watched your work," Hideo continued. "It is very good, very consistent, very controlled, but it has also become predictable, safe. You know what each piece will be before you make it. There is no surprise anymore, no discovery. You have mastered control, but you have lost encounter. You no longer meet the clay. You no longer allow the fire to teach you. You only impose your will and call the result success or failure based on how well reality matched your intention. The old master stood slowly, his joints creaking. Keep this bowl. Live with it. Let it teach you. Every time you see that crack, remember that life includes what you cannot control. That beauty can emerge from what you did not plan. That your finest work might be the work that surprises you. That includes the unexpected. That shows you something you did not already know. After Hideo left, June sat alone with the bowl. He wanted to feel differently about it. Wanted to see what his teacher saw. But mostly, he still saw failure. Still saw the gap between his intention and the result. He placed the bowl on a shelf where he would see it every day. And every day, he looked at it with the same disappointment. The same sense of something ruined. But slowly, over weeks and then months, something shifted. He began to notice other things about the bowl. The way the glaze had pooled in certain places, creating depth he had not anticipated. The way the curve of the wall caught morning light differently than his other work. The way the crack itself seemed to give the bowl a kind of character, a story, a uniqueness that his other perfect bowls lacked. He noticed too how his other work was changing. He found himself being less rigid with his plans, allowing small variations to emerge, accepting that a bowl might take a slightly different form than he had envisioned, not forcing every outcome to match his intention exactly. One day, a tea master from a distant city visited his workshop. She examined his pieces carefully, appreciatively. But when she saw the cracked bowl on its shelf, she stopped. She stood before it for a long time, not speaking. Then she turned to June with eyes that were bright. "This bowl," she said. "Will you sell it?" June was surprised. "It is cracked. It cannot hold water." "I do not need it to hold water. I need it to hold attention, to remind me that beauty includes the unplanned. That tea ceremony is not about perfect control, but about meeting each moment as it is. This bowl teaches what I spend my life trying to understand." She paid him 3 times what she would have paid for a perfect bowl. And as she carefully wrapped it to carry away, June realized something. The crack had not ruined the bowl. The crack had completed it, had made it what it was always meant to be. Not a demonstration of his control, but a demonstration of something larger. The meeting of intention and chance, of skill and mystery, of human effort and natural process. His finest work was indeed the cracked bowl. Not because he had made it perfectly, but because the fire, the clay, the heat, the cooling, all of it together had made something he could never have planned. Something that included his skill, but transcended his control. Something more real, more alive, more true than any perfect bowl could ever be. The story of June and his cracked bowl speaks directly to something we all face. The deep desire to control outcomes, to make things turn out the way we plan, to have our efforts result in exactly what we intend. This desire feels natural. It feels like wisdom. After all, should we not try to do things well? Should we not aim for good results? But Zen Buddhism points to something subtle here. There is a difference between skillful effort and the demand for control. June brought skill to his work. He knew his craft. He attended to each step. This was valuable. This was appropriate. But somewhere in his practice, Skill had become control. Making had become demanding. He was no longer working with clay and fire. He was trying to force them to conform to his will. When you let go of the demand for control, something opens. Not carelessness, not giving up on skillful action, but a kind of flexibility. A willingness to meet what actually happens rather than what you plan to happen. An ability to find value in unexpected outcomes. This is true in your own life as well. The moments when things do not go according to plan, when the unexpected enters, when you cannot control the outcome, these moments often contain the most profound teachings. The cracked bowl became June's teacher. Every time he saw it, he remembered. Reality includes the uncontrolled. Beauty includes the unexpected. Life is richer when you allow it to surprise you. When you stop trying to force everything to match your plan, when you recognize that your finest work might be the work that includes what you never intended. In a province known for its medicinal herbs, where mountain slopes grew plants found nowhere else, there lived a physician named Tomoko. She had studied with the greatest healers of her time, had learned which roots treated fever, which leaves eased pain, which teas cleared the mind, which poultices drew out infection. Her knowledge was deep, her skill respected throughout the region. She practiced in a small house at the edge of a village. People came to her with all manner of ailments. Some she could help immediately. A cut that needed stitching. A fever that needed cooling. A cough that needed soothing. Others required more time. Careful observation. Slow treatment. Gradual healing. But most who came to her left better than they arrived. Tomoko took satisfaction in this, in easing suffering, in returning people to health, in using her knowledge to make a difference. She saw herself as someone who helped, someone who healed, someone whose work mattered. One autumn day, a man came to her house. His name was Daigo. He was younger than Tomoko, perhaps 30 years old, but he moved like someone much older. His face was tight with pain, his breathing shallow. His skin had an unhealthy pallor. "I need your help," he said simply. Tomoko invited him to sit, asked him questions about his condition. How long had he been unwell? What were his symptoms? Had he tried other treatments? Daigo answered briefly, reluctantly. Yes, he had been sick for months. Yes, he had pain in his stomach. Yes, he had seen other physicians. No, nothing had helped. Tomoko examined him carefully, checked his pulse, observed his tongue, palpated his abdomen. She recognized the condition. It was serious but treatable. With the right herbs and proper rest, he could recover. It would take time, perhaps several months, but recovery was possible. She prepared a mixture of herbs, explained how to brew the tea 3 times daily between meals. The taste would be bitter, but he must drink it all. She also gave him instructions about food, certain things to avoid, certain things to eat. Rest was essential. He must not work until his strength returned. Daigo listened to all of this without expression. When she finished, he took the herbs, paid her fee, and left. 2 weeks later, he returned. He looked worse. The pain had increased. He had lost more weight. Tomoko was puzzled. The treatment should have begun helping by now. "Have you been taking the herbs as I instructed?" she asked. Daigo shifted uncomfortably. "I tried them once. The taste was too bitter. I could not drink it." "But you must drink it. The bitter taste is part of the medicine. That is how it works." "I do not like bitter things." Tomoko felt a flash of frustration. She prepared a different formula, made it sweeter, added honey to mask the harsh taste, gave him careful instructions again. The dosage must be exact. The timing must be regular. He must follow through. Daigo took the new herbs and left. But when he returned 3 weeks later, he was worse still. The pain was constant now. His skin had a yellowish tinge. Time was becoming critical. "Did you take the herbs this time?" Tomoko asked, though she already suspected the answer. "I took them for a few days," Daigo said. "But then I felt more tired. So I stopped. I thought maybe the herbs were making me worse." The tiredness is part of healing. Your body needs rest to recover. The herbs are working, but you must continue taking them. And you must rest, not keep working. I cannot rest. I have my fields to tend. My family depends on me. If you do not rest now, you will not be able to work at all. This illness will progress. It could become very serious. Daigo looked at her with something like defiance. "Then give me medicine that does not require me to rest. Something that lets me keep working." "There is no such medicine. Healing requires cooperation. You must do your part. Take the herbs. Follow the instructions. Rest your body. I can provide treatment, but I cannot heal you if you will not help yourself." But Daigo did not want to hear this. He wanted medicine that would fix him without requiring him to change anything, without the bitter taste, without the tiredness, without the rest, without any discomfort or inconvenience. He came back twice more over the following weeks, each time worse. Each time Tomoko offered treatment. Each time Daigo found reasons not to follow through. The herbs were too expensive. The instructions too complicated. The changes too difficult. He wanted healing, but he did not want any of the things healing required. Tomoko found herself lying awake at night, thinking about Daigo. She had the knowledge to help him. She had the skill to treat his condition. But she could not make him take the medicine, could not force him to rest, could not make him do what was necessary for his own recovery. She felt responsible, as if his worsening condition was her failure. She reviewed her diagnoses, questioned her treatments, wondered if she was missing something. Maybe there was a different approach, a different herb, some way to help him that did not require his cooperation. One evening, she visited her own teacher. Master Fumiko was elderly now, no longer practicing medicine, but her understanding was deep. Tomoko explained the situation, described her frustration, asked for advice. "You are trying to heal someone who does not want to be healed," Fumiko said quietly. "But he comes to me. He asks for help. He suffers. He wants relief. That is different from wanting healing. Relief requires nothing from him. Just take a medicine and feel better. But healing requires participation, requires change, requires him to do things he finds difficult or uncomfortable. He wants the result without the process. Tomoko felt the truth of this, but it did not ease her frustration. So I should just give up on him? Let him suffer when I know I could help? You are already helping. You are offering treatment. You are providing guidance. You are giving him what he needs. But you cannot make him receive it. You cannot force him to drink bitter tea or rest his body or change his habits. That part is his, not yours. Fumiko poured tea for them both, the familiar ritual calming. You believe your job is to heal people. But that is not your job. Your job is to offer healing, to provide treatment, to share your knowledge. But healing itself requires the patient's participation. You cannot do it for them. You can only do it with them. But if he does not improve, people will say, I failed. That my treatment did not work. Let them say it. Their judgment does not change what is true. You did not fail. You offered skillful treatment. Daigo failed to receive it. That is different. You are responsible for your part, not for his. The next time Daigo came, Tomoko saw him differently. She still examined him carefully, still offered treatment, still explained what he needed to do. But when he found reasons not to follow through, she did not take it as her failure. She offered. He declined. That was the reality. Daigo, she said gently, I have medicine that can help you, but it will not help if you do not take it. I have instructions that can guide your recovery, but they will not work if you do not follow them. I can offer treatment, but I cannot force healing. That part is yours. You must decide if you truly want to get well. If you are willing to do what wellness requires. Daigo looked at her with something like surprise. Previous physicians had pleaded with him, had tried to convince him, had taken responsibility for his choices. Tomoko was not doing that. She was making clear that healing was a collaboration, that she had her part and he had his, that her offering did not obligate him to receive, but his not receiving did not make her offering less valuable. I will think about it, Daigo said quietly. Good. When you are ready to participate in your own healing, I am here. My door is open. My knowledge is available. But I will not chase you. I will not take responsibility for choices that are yours to make. Daigo left. Tomoko did not know if he would return, did not know if he would ever choose healing over comfort. But she felt a weight lift from her shoulders. She had done her part. She had offered what she could offer. The rest was not hers to control. 3 months later, early in winter, Daigo appeared at her door again. He looked terrible, gaunt, weak, barely able to stand. But his eyes were different, clearer somehow, more present. I am ready, he said. Ready to do what is needed. All of it. The bitter tea. The rest. The changes. Whatever it takes. I am ready now. Tomoko invited him in, prepared new medicine, gave clear instructions. But this time she did not carry the burden of whether he would follow them. She had offered. He would choose. That was how it worked. Daigo did follow through this time. Drank the bitter tea without complaint. Rested even though it was difficult. Made changes even though they were uncomfortable. And slowly, over many months, he recovered. His color returned. His pain eased. His strength came back. When he was finally well, he thanked Tomoko with deep gratitude. "I am sorry I wasted so much time. Sorry I did not listen at first." "You were not ready," Tomoko said simply. "Readiness cannot be forced. It emerges in its own time. But you could have given up on me. Could have refused to see me. I offered what I could offer. That is my part. Whether you received it or not was your part. I cannot control your choices. I can only make my offering available." After Daigo left, Tomoko sat in her treatment room thinking about what she had learned. She was a healer, yes, but healing was not something she did to people. It was something she participated in. She offered knowledge, skill, medicine, guidance. But the other person had to receive, to cooperate, to do their part. She could not control that. Could not force it. Could only make her offering and let it be received or not. This understanding changed her practice. She still worked with great care and skill. Still offered her best knowledge. But she no longer carried the weight of outcomes she could not control. She did her part fully. Then released the results. Offered without attachment to whether the offering was accepted. Some patients improved. Some did not. Some followed her guidance. Some ignored it. But Tomoko remained steady, available, clear about her role and its limits. She could offer healing. She could not force it. And in accepting this truth, she found a peace that had eluded her when she believed she should be able to heal everyone who came to her door. Tomoko's peace came not from controlling outcomes, but from clarifying her role. She could offer. That was her part. She could offer with skill and care and genuine desire to help. But the receiving was not hers to control. And in accepting this limit, she found the freedom to continue offering without the burden of trying to force acceptance. This is the wisdom Zen Buddhism points to again and again. Do your part. Do it fully. Do it with attention and care. But then release the results. Offer without attachment to outcome. Act without demanding specific results. Give without controlling how your gift is used. In this release, in this letting go of control, there is a profound peace. Not the peace of getting what you want, but the peace of accepting what you cannot control. The peace of understanding where your responsibility ends and another's begins. As you rest here, breathing slowly, these teachings settle into your awareness. Control is exhausting. The constant effort to make everything conform to your plan drains energy and creates struggle. But letting go of control does not mean abandoning skillful action. It means understanding the difference between doing your part and controlling outcomes, between offering fully and demanding acceptance. And in releasing the demand for control, you discover something unexpected. Life becomes more interesting, more alive, more full of possibility. Because when you stop forcing everything to match your plan, you allow reality to surprise you, to teach you, to show you what you could not have imagined. This is the gift of letting go. not passivity, not defeat, but the recognition that your peace does not depend on controlling outcomes. It depends on understanding your part and doing it fully while releasing what is beyond your influence. The teachings of Zen Buddhism return us always to this simple truth. Meet life as it actually is, not as you demand it should be. Work with what is here, not with what you wish were here. Offer your best, then let go of the results. In this release, this letting go, this acceptance of life's uncontrollable nature, there is a peace deeper than any control could ever provide. In a town known for its scholars and artists, where festivals celebrated calligraphy and poetry, there lived a man named Takeshi. He was a calligrapher of great reputation. His brushwork had won recognition at competitions throughout the province. Takeshi had studied calligraphy since childhood. His father had been a calligrapher before him, and his grandfather before that. The family tradition stretched back generations. Takeshi had learned each stroke through repetition. 10,000 times writing the character for water, 10,000 times for mountain, 10,000 times for peace. His hand knew the movements without conscious thought. The brush became an extension of his will. Each morning, Takeshi rose before dawn. He ground fresh ink, prepared his paper, set out his brushes. Then he would practice for several hours before taking commissions. Practice was essential. Even at his level of skill, even after decades of daily work, he maintained strict discipline. Without practice, the hand grew clumsy. The strokes lost their precision. Lately, though, something had changed. Something Takeshi could not quite identify. His technical skill remained excellent. His characters were still well formed, but they had lost something. A quality he could not name. When he looked at his recent work, he saw competence, correctness, but not life, not energy. The characters sat on the page perfectly balanced, but somehow dead. This troubled him deeply. At first, he thought he needed more practice. So, he increased his hours, woke earlier, practiced longer, ground his ink with more care, selected his brushes with more attention. But the problem persisted. His work remained technically perfect and somehow lifeless. He examined scrolls from his earlier years, work he had done as a younger man before his reputation was established. Those characters had something his current work lacked. They were less perfect in their form. Sometimes the balance was slightly off. Sometimes the stroke pressure varied more than it should. But they were alive. They had energy. They seemed to breathe on the page. What had he lost? What had changed between then and now? One afternoon, a young girl came to his studio. She was perhaps 8 years old, daughter of a neighbor. She had watched Takeshi through his window many times and was fascinated by calligraphy. Her mother had given permission for her to visit and observe. Takeshi set her up in the corner with paper and a simple brush. He showed her how to hold it, how to grind ink, how to begin learning the basic strokes. Then he returned to his own work, preparing a commission for a merchant family. Important characters that needed to be perfect. He could hear the girl behind him, the sound of her brush on paper. Soft, hesitant, uncertain. He smiled to himself, remembering his own early attempts. How clumsy his first strokes had been. How long it had taken to develop control. After an hour, he finished his work. He looked at what he had created. The characters were flawless, perfectly balanced, exactly correct, and completely without life. He felt a familiar frustration rising. What was he doing wrong? The girl spoke from behind him. "Master Takeshi, may I show you what I made?" He turned, ready to offer gentle correction. She held up her paper. On it were several attempts at the character for joy. They were terrible from a technical perspective. The strokes were uneven. The balance was wrong. The proportions were off. Everything about them violated proper form. But they were alive. They were joyful. They danced on the page with an energy that made Takeshi's perfect characters look dead by comparison. He stared at her work, something shifting in his chest. "Tell me," he said quietly, "what were you thinking about as you wrote these?" The girl looked confused by the question. "Thinking about?" "I was not thinking. I was just writing. Trying to make the character for joy look like joy feels." "And how does joy feel?" "Like jumping. Like laughing. Like when you are so happy you cannot hold still." She looked at her characters. "I know they are not right. The teacher at school says my writing is too messy. But I was trying to show how joy moves." Takeshi looked at his own work again. What had he been thinking about as he wrote? He had been thinking about correct form, about proper balance, about what the merchant would expect, about his reputation, about technical perfection. He had been thinking about the result, about how it would be judged, about whether it was good enough. He had not been thinking about the meaning of the characters, had not been feeling anything about what they said. He had been executing them, like a craftsman following a pattern. Technically perfect, but absent of any actual presence with what he was doing. "Your characters are wonderful," he told the girl. "Do not let anyone make you lose this quality they have. This aliveness." She beamed with pleasure, not quite understanding why her messy work was being praised by a master calligrapher. After she left, Takeshi sat alone in his studio. The light was fading. His perfect characters lay on the table before him, and he saw clearly what had happened over the years. He had learned technique so well that he no longer needed to be present. His hand could execute the strokes automatically. His mind could wander, could think about other things, could plan, could worry, could judge, and the characters would still be technically correct. But they would be empty. The girl had no technique. She had to be completely present with each stroke, had to attend to the brush, the ink, the paper, the movement. She could not execute automatically. So her full attention was there. And that attention, that presence, came through in the work. It made her clumsy strokes more alive than his perfect ones. He realized he had forgotten how to be present with his own work, had trained himself so thoroughly that he could do it without actually being there. And in that absence, the work had died. The next morning, Takeshi approached his practice differently. He did not try to change his technique. He tried to change where his attention was. As he lifted his brush, he felt its weight. Noticed the texture of the bamboo handle. Saw how the light caught the bristles. When he dipped it in ink, he watched how the ink was absorbed, how it clung to the brush, how it would flow when pressed to paper. As he began to write, he stayed present with each stroke, not thinking about the next stroke or judging the previous one. Just here with this stroke, this movement, this moment of brush meeting paper. He felt the texture of the paper, heard the slight whisper of bristles, saw the ink flowing, spreading, settling. The characters that emerged were different, still technically skillful. His years of practice had not disappeared, but they had something else now, something that had been missing, a quality of attention, of presence, of actual contact between the calligrapher and what he was creating. He looked at these new characters and felt something he had not felt in years. Recognition, as if he was meeting his own work again, as if he had been absent for a long time and was finally returning. Over the following weeks, Takeshi discovered something. Presence required constant practice. His habit of distraction was strong. His mind wanted to wander to other concerns, to judge what he was creating, to think about results. But each time he noticed this drift, he brought his attention back to the brush, to the ink, to this stroke, to this moment. His work began to change. Clients noticed, though they could not say exactly what was different. The characters were somehow more compelling, more alive. They had an energy that drew the eye and held it. Takeshi understood that his earlier years had been spent developing skill, learning technique, training his hand. This was necessary. This was valuable. But somewhere in that process, he had lost the very thing that makes work meaningful. He had lost presence, had lost the quality of actually being there with what he was doing. The girl had given him a teaching she did not know she was offering. That technique without presence is dead. That skill serves nothing if you are not actually there to use it. That the quality of your attention matters more than the perfection of your execution. He kept a small scroll the girl had made hanging in his studio. Her messy, joyful characters reminding him daily, be here, be present. Let your attention meet what you are doing. This is where life enters the work. Not in perfect technique, but in the presence brought to that technique. The invitation of Zen Buddhism is simple. Come back. Be here. Not forever. You will wander again. But when you notice you have wandered, return. To this breath. To this step. To this taste. To this moment. To actual presence with what is actually happening. This does not require you to be perfect. The girl's calligraphy was technically terrible, but it was present. It was alive. Presence is not about doing things perfectly. It is about being there while you do them. About bringing your full attention to whatever is here rather than dividing your awareness between what is here and what you wish were here or fear might be coming. When you live with more presence, everything becomes richer. Not because circumstances improve, but because you are actually experiencing your circumstances rather than thinking about them. The taste of simple food becomes complex. The feeling of breath becomes interesting. The sound of rain becomes music. Not because these things change, but because you are finally there to notice them. This is what Takeshi discovered, that his finest work would not come from more technique. It would come from more presence. from actually being there with his brush and ink and paper, from bringing his attention fully to what he was doing rather than executing it mechanically while his mind was elsewhere. The girl's messy characters became his teacher, a reminder that technique serves presence, not the other way around. That skill is valuable only when animated by actual attention. That the quality of your work, the quality of your life, depends not on how perfectly you perform, but on how fully you show up. A merchant named Hiroshi made his living trading silk. He traveled between villages and towns, buying from weavers and selling to those who could afford fine cloth. Over 20 years, he had built considerable wealth. His home was comfortable, his family well provided for. He had accumulated enough that he no longer needed to work, but he continued because he enjoyed the challenge of negotiation and the satisfaction of a successful trade. Each spring, he made a journey to the mountain villages where the finest silk was produced. The trip took 2 weeks. He would fill his cart with bolts of silk, carefully wrapped and protected, then make the long journey back to sell them in the larger towns. The profit from this annual trip sustained him through the rest of the year. This particular spring, Hiroshi set out with his most valuable load yet. He had spent the winter accumulating funds, and he had purchased silk of exceptional quality. The cart was heavy with it. More wealth than he had ever carried at one time. Enough to secure his family's future for many years. The journey went smoothly for the first week. Good weather, clear roads, no trouble. Hiroshi felt satisfied. Everything was proceeding as planned. On the 8th day, as he traveled through a narrow mountain pass, 3 men stepped onto the road ahead of him. They carried clubs. Their faces were covered. Bandits. Hiroshi's heart began to pound. He thought about turning the cart around, but the path was too narrow. He thought about outrunning them, but his cart was too heavy. There was nowhere to go. The bandits approached. One of them spoke. "Get down from the cart." Hiroshi climbed down slowly. His legs felt weak. "What are you carrying?" "Silk." "I am a merchant." The bandits looked at each other. Silk was valuable, easy to carry, easy to sell. They moved to the cart and began pulling back the coverings. When they saw the quantity and quality of what Hiroshi carried, they smiled. "You are a wealthy man," one of them said. "That silk represents years of work," Hiroshi said. His voice was shaking. "My family depends on it. Please, take some, but leave me enough to survive." The bandits ignored him. They began transferring the bolts of silk to their own packs. Methodically, taking everything. Hiroshi watched his wealth disappearing. 20 years of careful work. Gone. His family's security. Gone. His future. Gone. "Please," he said again. But they did not respond. When they had taken the last of the silk, they looked at him. For a moment, Hiroshi thought they might kill him. Leave no witness. But they just turned and walked away, disappearing into the forest with everything he owned. Hiroshi stood beside his empty cart. The sun was warm on his face. Birds were singing. The mountain air smelled of pine. Everything appeared peaceful, beautiful. But inside him, there was only emptiness and growing panic. What would he tell his wife? His children? How would they survive? He had no goods to sell. no money to buy more. Everything was gone. Years of effort reduced to nothing in a few minutes. He sat down on the ground beside the cart. The shock was wearing off, replaced by despair. He had failed. Lost everything. He imagined his family's faces when he returned with nothing. The shame, the fear, the uncertainty. He sat there for a long time. The sun moved across the sky. Eventually, he realized he needed to move, needed to start the journey home, needed to face what he had lost. As he stood and brushed off his clothes, he noticed something strange. The panic was still there, the worry about the future. But there was something else too, something he had not expected. A kind of lightness. For 20 years, he had been carrying something he had not quite noticed. The weight of wealth, the constant concern about protecting it, the worry about losing it, the need to guard it, the fear of thieves or fire or poor decisions. All of that weight had been so constant he had stopped noticing it. But now it was gone. He had nothing left to lose, nothing left to protect. The worst had happened, and he was still here, still breathing, still able to walk, still alive. He started walking, leading his empty cart. The first day was difficult. His mind kept spinning stories about disaster, about poverty, about shame, but he kept walking. On the second day, something shifted. He noticed things he had missed on the journey out. The way light fell through trees, the sound of a stream, the smell of wild flowers. When he was carrying valuable cargo, he had been too tense to notice such things, too focused on protecting what he had. But now, with nothing to lose, his attention was free. He stopped at a small village. He had no money to pay for lodging, but he explained his situation to the innkeeper. The man offered him a meal and a place to sleep in exchange for help with repairs to the building. Hiroshi worked for several hours, fixing a door and mending a section of roof. The work felt good, simple, direct. He slept better than he had in years. The next morning, he continued walking. He found he was not rushing, not anxious to arrive, just walking, meeting each day as it came. Sometimes people offered help. Sometimes he worked for meals. Sometimes he went hungry. All of it was just what was happening. When he finally reached his home, he stood outside for a long time before entering. He did not know what he would find inside. Anger? Disappointment? Fear? But when he opened the door, his wife saw his face and simply came to him, held him. "What happened?" she asked. "I lost everything. Bandits took all the silk." She was quiet for a moment. Then she said, "But you are here. You are safe. That is what matters." Hiroshi felt tears come. Not tears of despair. Something else. Something like relief. She was right. He was here. He was safe. Everything else was gone, but this remained. In the days that followed, they adjusted to their new situation. They had some savings, though not much. Hiroshi took work where he could find it, helping neighbors, doing repairs, teaching young men about trading. The work was different from what he had done before, more immediate, more connected to people. He noticed something surprising. The fear that had driven him for so many years, the fear of not having enough, had quieted. He had lost everything and discovered that he could survive it, that he was not destroyed by it, that something essential remained even when everything else was gone. His wife noticed the change. "You seem different," she said one evening. "I feel lighter," he said. "I did not realize how heavy it was carrying all that wealth. Not just the silk, but the worry about it, the need to protect it, the fear of losing it. Now it is gone, and I am still here. We are still here, and that is enough." Months later, Hiroshi slowly began to rebuild. He started small, a few modest trades, but he held his new wealth differently, not as something that defined him, not as something he needed to cling to, just as something he had for now, something that could be lost again and he would still be all right. The bandits had taken his silk, but in taking it, they had given him something unexpected: freedom from the weight of possession, recognition that what he truly needed was much smaller than what he had been protecting. Understanding that loss, even devastating loss, could be survived, that he was larger than anything that could be taken from him. The story of Hiroshi and the bandits touches something tender in human experience: the fear of losing what we have, the weight of protecting what we own, the belief that our security depends on holding tight to what we have accumulated, and the surprising discovery that comes sometimes when loss arrives despite our best efforts. Hiroshi had spent 20 years building wealth. This is natural. He worked hard, provided for his family, accumulated resources to protect against future hardship. Nothing wrong in any of this. But underneath the accumulation, something else was accumulating too. The weight of worry, the constant tension of protecting, the fear that lived in the background, quiet but always present. When the bandits took everything, they removed not just the silk, but the burden of carrying it. In that moment of complete loss, something unexpected became visible: that he had been weighting himself down with more than fabric and coin. He had been carrying the fear of this very moment, the imagined catastrophe of losing it all. And when it actually happened, when the feared thing became real, he discovered he could survive it. There is a quality of holding that creates suffering beyond the natural pain of loss. When we grip something so tightly that our whole sense of security depends on it, we live in constant fear of its loss. The possession becomes a burden as much as a benefit. We protect it, worry about it, organize our lives around keeping it. And in all this protecting, we lose a certain ease, a certain lightness, a certain freedom to simply be present with what is actually here. Hiroshi discovered that with nothing left to protect, his attention became available for other things: the beauty of the forest, the kindness of strangers, the simple satisfaction of work done for its own sake. These things had always been there, but he had not quite seen them. His attention had been occupied elsewhere, on guarding, on accumulating, on maintaining what he had built. The lightness he felt was not joy at his loss. It was relief from the burden of protection, the discovery that even in poverty, even in failure, something essential remained. He was still here, still capable of walking and working and connecting with others, still able to experience moments of simple presence, The loss had removed layers of accumulated worry and revealed something underneath that had always been there but obscured. Zen Buddhism points to this again and again, that we confuse what we have with what we are, that we build identities around possessions and accomplishments and circumstances. And when these things are threatened or lost, we feel our very existence is threatened. But this is confusion. What we are goes deeper than what we have, remains when what we have is removed, cannot be taken by any bandit or destroyed by any circumstance. This does not mean we should not work or build or accumulate, but it suggests a different relationship with what we accumulate, holding things lightly, using them, enjoying them, but not building our entire sense of security or identity around them, recognizing that they are temporary, that they can be lost, and that we will continue even if they are. The bandits appeared as destroyers. They took what Hiroshi had spent years building, but in taking it, they inadvertently revealed something, that he could survive the loss, that what he fundamentally was remained even when what he had was gone, that the weight he had been carrying was heavier than he knew. This was not their intention, but it was the outcome nonetheless. Sometimes loss teaches what accumulation obscures. That security does not come from how much we have, but from understanding what we actually need. That freedom does not come from having more, but from fearing loss less. That we are more resilient than we imagine, more capable of surviving difficulty, more able to find what we need even when we think everything is gone. Hiroshi began to rebuild his life on a different foundation, not on the belief that enough wealth would finally make him secure, but on the recognition that he could work with whatever he had, that he could meet circumstances as they arose. That loss could happen again and he would survive it again. This was not defeat. It was a kind of wisdom, a kind of freedom that comes not from having everything, but from knowing that having nothing is survivable. In the capital city, in a temple known for its library, a man named Takeo spent his days with ancient texts. He was a scholar and scribe. His work was to copy important manuscripts to preserve them for future generations. He had been doing this for 40 years, day after day, page after page, character after character. His brushwork was meticulous, his copies faithful to the originals. His life's purpose was preservation. The library where he worked held thousands of texts, Buddhist sutras, historical records, poetry, philosophy, medical knowledge. Some of the manuscripts were centuries old. Some were the only copies in existence. All of it was valuable, irreplaceable, and all of it depended on people like Takeo to keep it from being lost to time. Takeo took his work seriously. He arrived early, stayed late, never rushed, never made errors he could avoid. Each character he wrote was an act of devotion to the teachings contained in the texts, to the authors who had written them, to the future monks and scholars who would read them. He was working on a particularly important project, a complete copy of a text that existed in only one crumbling original. The pages were brittle with age, the characters fading. If it was not copied soon, it would be lost forever. Takeo had been working on it for 2 years. He was near completion. Perhaps 2 more months of work remained. One afternoon in late summer, Takeo left the library to eat his midday meal outside. The weather was hot, the air still. He sat under a tree and ate rice and vegetables. He could see the library from where he sat today. A beautiful building, elegant in its simplicity, a place that had stood for more than 100 years. As he was finishing his meal, he smelled smoke. He looked around, trying to locate the source. Then he saw it. Smoke coming from the library, from somewhere inside the building. He dropped his bowl and ran. Other monks were already running toward the building. Someone was shouting for water. Takeo reached the entrance and looked inside. The smoke was thick. He could see flames in the main hall where the manuscripts were kept. Monks were rushing in and out, carrying what they could. Armfuls of scrolls and books. Takeo joined them. He ran into the smoke. His eyes burned. His lungs ached. He grabbed manuscripts from the shelves, carried them outside, ran back in for more. But the fire was spreading quickly. The wooden building, the paper manuscripts, everything burned easily. The monks formed lines, passing water in buckets, but it was not enough. The flames grew larger, hotter, more consuming. Eventually, someone grabbed Takeo as he tried to run back inside. No more. The roof is going to collapse. Everyone out. Takeo stood with the other monks, watching the library burn. They had saved some texts, a fraction of what the library held, but most of it was gone. Centuries of preserved knowledge, irreplaceable manuscripts, all turning to ash. Takeo watched the flames consume the building. Somewhere in there was his project, the copy he had spent 2 years creating, the ancient text he had been preserving, all of it burning, gone. He waited for the feeling to hit him, the grief, the devastation, the sense of futility. 2 years of work for nothing. But the feeling that came was not what he expected. He felt present, more present than he had felt in a long time. The heat from the fire on his face, the smell of smoke, the sound of burning wood, the sight of flames against the evening sky. All of it was vivid, immediate, real. He looked at his hands, the hands that had written thousands of characters, that had copied page after page with devoted care. They were still here, still capable. The manuscript was gone, but the hands that had written it remained. He thought about the text he had been copying. He knew it well, had read every word multiple times, had contemplated its meaning as he copied it. The physical pages were burning, but what he had learned from them was still present. In his mind, in his understanding, that could not burn. An old monk stood beside him. Master Chen, the head of the library. He too was watching the fire. His face was calm. Sad, but calm. 40 years of my life in that building, Master Chen said quietly. 40 years of collecting, organizing, preserving, all gone in an afternoon. I am sorry, Master, Takeo said. Master Chen smiled slightly. Do not be sorry. This is what happens. All created things are temporary. All preserved things eventually fade. We knew this. We just forgot it while we were busy preserving. But the knowledge, the teachings, they are lost. Some of them, yes. But consider, those teachings were written down because someone had realized them, understood them, embodied them. The true teachings are not in the texts. They are in the understanding. And that understanding can arise again, has arisen again and again throughout history. The books are just fingers pointing at the moon. The fire has burned the fingers, but the moon remains. Takeo stood quietly, absorbing this. He had spent 40 years preserving texts. It was important work, valuable work. But Master Chen was pointing to something deeper. The texts were not the teachings themselves. They were records of understanding, maps, tools, and tools can be remade. As the fire finally died down, leaving only smoking ruins, the monks began to assess what they had saved. It was not much, a few hundred texts out of thousands. But it was something, a beginning for rebuilding. In the days that followed, Takeo felt a strange mixture of sadness and clarity. Sadness for what was lost, for the beautiful manuscripts that no longer existed, for the years of work that had burned, but clarity too, about what truly mattered, about what could be lost and what could not. He realized he had been holding his work in a certain way, as if the preservation of the physical texts was the ultimate goal, as if keeping the paper and ink from fading was what mattered most. But now, with the texts gone, he saw differently. The physical preservation was valuable but not ultimate. What truly mattered was keeping the understanding alive, keeping the teachings relevant, keeping the wisdom available to those who sought it. The manuscripts he had copied were gone, but he had read them, studied them, contemplated them. That engagement had changed him, had deepened his understanding, and that understanding remained. The fire could not touch it. Master Chen gathered the monks who had worked in the library. "We will rebuild," he said. "We will begin again. Some texts can be copied from other libraries. Some we will have to do without. But we will continue the work of preservation. Not because we can keep things forever. We cannot. But because each generation needs access to the wisdom of previous generations. We preserve not to defeat impermanence, but to work with it, to pass things forward while we can." He looked at Takeo. "You spent 2 years on a manuscript that is now ash. Do you regret that time?" Takeo thought about this. Did he regret it? He had learned much while copying that text, had developed his skill, had deepened his understanding of the teachings it contained. "No," he said slowly. "I do not regret it. The work had value even if the product is gone." "Yes," Master Chen said. "The value was in the doing, not just in the thing produced. You became a better scholar, a deeper practitioner. The manuscript was a vehicle for that development. Its loss is sad, but not a negation of the time spent." Takeo began working on rebuilding the library. But he worked with a different spirit. Still careful, still devoted, but not as attached to outcomes. He understood now that whatever he created could be lost, could burn or fade or be destroyed. But the work itself had value, the attention brought to it, the understanding developed through it. These things remained even when the product was gone. He also noticed something else. He enjoyed his work more. When he had believed preservation was ultimate, there was always an undercurrent of anxiety. The manuscripts were fragile. Time was relentless. Decay was inevitable. He was fighting a losing battle. But now, understanding that loss was inevitable, there was a kind of peace. He was not trying to defeat time. He was just working with what was here, preserving while preservation was possible, and knowing that when it was no longer possible, that would be all right too. The library was eventually rebuilt. New manuscripts were added. Some of what was lost was recovered from other collections. Some was gone forever, but the work continued. And Takeo continued his careful copying. Each character written with full attention. Not because it would last forever, but because this moment of writing was valuable in itself. The work was its own reward. The preservation was a gift to the future, but a gift given without expectation of permanence. The fire had taken much, but it had also given something, a clarity about what matters, a recognition of impermanence, not as enemy, but as simple truth, a freedom from the anxiety of trying to make the temporary permanent, and in that freedom, a deeper appreciation for the work itself, for the simple act of brushing ink onto paper, for the quiet satisfaction of faithful copying, for the privilege of engaging with ancient wisdom, even briefly, even knowing that everything eventually returns to ash. This story of Takeo and the burning library points to a deep truth about all creative and preservative work. We build, we create, we maintain, we preserve. All valuable activities, all worth doing. But underneath, often unexamined, sits a belief that somehow we can make the temporary permanent, that our efforts will defeat time, that what we create or preserve will last forever. And this belief creates a subtle anxiety that colors all our work. When the fire came, it destroyed 40 years of careful preservation, thousands of manuscripts, centuries of accumulated wisdom, all gone in an afternoon. This was genuine loss, real tragedy. The texts that burned were valuable. Their destruction was not good. Takeo's sadness was appropriate. But within the loss, something else emerged. A recognition that had always been true but obscured by the daily work of preservation. That everything created is temporary. That all efforts to preserve are ultimately futile against the vastness of time. That the manuscripts were always going to fade eventually. The fire just made it happen sooner. This recognition could have been devastating. Could have made all efforts seem pointless. If everything eventually burns or fades, why bother creating or preserving anything? But what Takeo discovered was different. The value of his work was not only in the product, it was in the doing itself. The attention he brought to copying. The understanding he developed through engaging with the texts. The skill he refined. The devotion he practiced. All of this remained even when the product was destroyed. There is something here about the relationship between process and outcome. We often think the outcome is what matters. The finished manuscript, the completed project, the preserved text. And outcomes do matter. They are why we do the work. But when we make outcomes everything, when we invest all meaning product, we become anxious about protecting that product. We live in fear of its loss. And when loss comes, we feel devastated. Not just sad, which is natural, but as if the work itself was meaningless because the outcome is gone. But what if the meaning is distributed differently? What if the outcome matters, but so does the process? What if the hours spent carefully copying had value in themselves, regardless of whether the manuscript survived? Then loss is still sad, still painful, but not obliterating, not a negation of everything that came before. Master Chen's words about the teachings versus the texts point to something important. The physical manuscripts were valuable as carriers of wisdom, as tools for transmission, but they were not the wisdom itself. The wisdom was in the understanding, and understanding arises in minds, not on pages. The fire destroyed pages, but could not touch the understanding that those pages had helped create. This is true of all our creative and preservative efforts. We write books that will eventually decay, build buildings that will eventually crumble, make art that will eventually fade, teach students who will eventually die. Everything we make is temporary. Everything we preserve is fighting a battle against time that time will ultimately win. This is not pessimism. This is just reality. Impermanence is not a flaw in the design of the world. It is a basic characteristic of existence. When we resist this truth, when we try to make things permanent, we create suffering beyond the natural sadness of loss. We exhaust ourselves trying to protect what cannot be protected forever. We live in anxiety about the inevitable. We miss the simple satisfaction of the work because we are so focused on ensuring the product survives. But when we accept impermanence, when we work within it rather than against it, something shifts. We can still do the work, still preserve what we can, still create with care, but we hold it differently. We know it is temporary. We know it will eventually be lost. And knowing this, we can appreciate it more fully while it is here, can enjoy the work itself without the burden of believing we must make it last forever. Takeo continued his careful copying after the fire, not because he thought his new manuscripts would be permanent, but because the work itself was valuable, because transmission matters even when what is transmitted is temporary, because this moment of writing has meaning even if what is written will someday burn or fade. There is a kind of peace in this acceptance, not resignation, not giving up, but a clear-eyed understanding that allows us to work without anxiety, to create knowing that what we create is temporary, to preserve knowing that preservation is temporary, to do the work for the value of the work, not just for the hope of permanent outcomes. The fire took much from the library, but it also burned away a certain illusion. The illusion that through enough effort, enough care, enough devotion, we could make the temporary permanent. That illusion creates suffering. Its removal, painful as the process was, created a clearer relationship with the work. Takeo was free to copy manuscripts without the weight of believing he was protecting them forever. Just protecting them for now. Just offering what he could while circumstances allowed. And that was enough. As you continue resting, breathing gently, these reflections on impermanence settle naturally. Loss is part of life. Change is constant. Everything we build and create and preserve is temporary. This is not something to fear. It is simply true. And in accepting this truth, rather than fighting against it, there can be a surprising lightness. A freedom to engage fully with what is here, knowing it will not last forever. Knowing that is perfectly all right. The silk merchant discovered he could survive loss. The scholar discovered his work had value beyond its products. Both learned something about holding life lightly, not carelessly, but without the desperate grip that comes from believing we can make the temporary permanent. This is what Zen Buddhism points toward. Not detachment in the sense of not caring, but a clear understanding that allows us to care deeply while knowing that everything changes. Everything ends. And we continue anyway, able to find what we need, able to work with what is here, able to meet each moment as it arrives. In a mountain village, a craftsman named Riku spent his days making mirrors. Not the large decorative mirrors found in wealthy homes, but small hand mirrors of polished bronze. Simple tools that allowed people to see their own faces. His workshop was modest. A furnace for melting metal. Tools for shaping and polishing. A grinding stone worn smooth from years of use. Riku had been making mirrors for 20 years. The work was repetitive but satisfying. Each mirror required the same careful process. Casting the bronze disc, grinding the surface, polishing until it reflected clearly. He had made thousands of them, each one eventually carried away by a customer to look at their own reflection. Lately, though, a question had been troubling him. A question that arose each time he handed a finished mirror to someone. They would look into it, see their face, and be satisfied. But what were they actually seeing? What was this self that appeared in the polished surface? The question grew stronger. He found himself staring at his own reflection between tasks, looking at the face that looked back at him. Was that who he was? That face? Those features? If he closed his eyes, he still felt like himself. So was the reflection him or just an image? He tried to push the question aside. It was interfering with his work. Mirrors were for seeing, not for philosophical confusion. But the question persisted, grew larger, until he realized he needed to find someone who might understand. There was a musician in the village, a man named Kaito, who had been blind since birth. He played the flute at festivals and gatherings. His music was beautiful, clear and expressive. People said he saw more than most people with eyes. Riku visited him one evening, found him sitting outside his home, the flute resting across his lap. "Master Kaito, I have a question that troubles me. May I ask it?" "Of course. Sit." Riku settled on the ground beside him. "I make mirrors. Each day, people look into them and see themselves. But I have begun to wonder, what is this self they see? Is the reflection who they are?" Kaito was quiet for a moment. Then he smiled slightly. "You make mirrors but have never seen your own face. Is that right?" "No, I see it every day. In the mirrors I polish. In still water. I know what I look like." "Then perhaps I should ask differently. You see an image that you call your face. But is that you? If I touch your arm right now, I feel something solid, warm, breathing. Is that more you than the image in the mirror?" Riku considered this. "My body is me, yes. The mirror shows what my body looks like. And if your body is you, then when your body changes, do you change? When you were a child, you had a child's body. Now you have a man's body. Were you different people? Or the same person in different forms? The same person. I remember being that child. I have changed, but I am still me. So you are not your body, exactly. You are something that experiences having a body. Something that continues while the body changes. Kaito lifted his flute. When I play this instrument, am I the flute? Or am I the one playing it? You are the player, not the instrument. Yes. And you are not the body. You are the awareness that experiences the body. The consciousness that looks through the eyes, hears through the ears, feels through the skin. That awareness has no face, has no form, cannot be reflected in any mirror. Riku felt something shift. But if I am not my body, not my face, then what am I? That is the question, is it not? What are you? Not what do you look like. Not what is your name or your history or your thoughts. But what are you in your most fundamental nature? Kaito turned toward him, his blind eyes somehow seeing more than most eyes did. I have never seen a face. Not yours. Not my own. Not my mother's or father's. I have never known what anyone looks like. And yet, I know people. I recognize them by their voice, their presence, the quality of their being. To me, identity has nothing to do with appearance. Then how do you know who you are? I am the awareness that hears, that feels, that experiences this moment. Not the experiences themselves, but that which knows them. Like you are the mirror maker, not the mirror. You create reflections, but you are not the reflection. Riku sat with this. So the mirrors I make, they show something true, but not the deepest truth. They show appearance, but not essence. Yes? And this is why people look in mirrors with such concern. They see an image and think that is who they are. They worry about how they look because they believe appearance defines them. They fear aging because they think they are their body. They compare their reflection to others and feel inferior or superior based on images. All because they mistake the reflection for the self. But we do have bodies. We do have faces. Are you saying these do not matter? They matter. Your body matters. But it is not you. It is something you experience. Something you move through the world in. Like clothing. Your robes matter. They keep you warm. They cover you. But you are not your robes. You can change them and still be yourself. Kaito played a few notes on his flute. The sound clear in the evening air. When I play, where is the music? In the flute? In the air? In your ears? Or in the awareness that hears? In all of those places. And in none of them, exactly. Yes. The music arises from all those conditions meeting. The flute, the breath, the air, the hearing. But the music itself is not located in any one place. It is an experience that happens when conditions align. Your sense of self is similar. It arises from many conditions. Body, memory, thoughts, sensations. But the self is not located in any one of these things. It is more like music than like an object. More like a process than a thing. Riku felt his understanding shifting. For 20 years he had been making objects that claimed to show people who they were, but they showed only surfaces, only appearances. The deeper truth, the awareness looking through the eyes, could never be reflected. So what should I tell people who buy my mirrors? That they are looking at an illusion? Kaito laughed gently. No need to disturb their purchase. Let them see what they see. But you can know differently. You can know that what you are creating shows one level of truth, the surface. And that beneath the surface is something the mirror cannot capture, the awareness itself, the consciousness that looks but cannot be looked at, the seer that has no face. After that conversation, Riku continued making mirrors. But his relationship with the work changed. He no longer saw the mirrors as showing who people were. He saw them as showing what people looked like. A subtle but important difference. The reflection was information, not identity. He also noticed something about himself. When he stopped identifying so completely with his appearance, with his body, with his thoughts, there was a quality of freedom. He was still Riku, the mirror maker, still had his face and form and history. But he did not feel confined by these things. They were part of his experience, not the totality of what he was. Sometimes customers would come in and talk about their appearance, about wanting to look different, about aging or imperfection. And Riku would feel compassion for how seriously they took the reflection. How much suffering came from believing the image was the self. He kept a mirror in his workshop, not polished perfectly, slightly clouded. When he looked into it, he could barely see his features. Just a general shape, a suggestion of a face. And this felt more true somehow, because the clarity of reflection created the illusion of fixed identity. But the clouded mirror showed the truth. That appearance is always shifting, always approximate, never quite capturing what you actually are. Kaito had given him a teaching that went deeper than any instruction about metalwork ever could. That you are not what you see in the mirror. You are the awareness that sees. And that awareness has no form, no face, no reflection. It simply is. Always present. Always aware. Always here. The constant witness to all changing appearances. This story of Riku and the blind musician points to one of the most profound insights in Zen Buddhism. That what you call yourself, this sense of being someone, is not located where you think it is. You are accustomed to identifying with your body, your appearance, your thoughts. You look in a mirror and think that is you. But is it? Consider carefully. When you see your reflection, you are seeing an image. Light bouncing off a surface. The image changes depending on the mirror, the lighting, the angle. Which reflection is the real you? The one from 10 years ago? The one from this morning? The one you will see 10 years from now? They are all different images. So, which one is actually you? The body you identified with as a child is gone. Those cells have been replaced. That size and shape no longer exists. Yet, you still feel like the same person. You remember being that child. So clearly, you are not your body exactly. You are something that experiences having a body. Something that continues while the body constantly changes. The same is true of your thoughts. they come and go. Right now, you are thinking one thought. A moment ago, it was a different thought. Are you your thoughts? If so, which thought? The ones from yesterday? The ones happening now? The ones that will come tomorrow? And if you can observe your thoughts, notice them arising and passing, then who is doing the observing? The thought, or something aware of the thought? This is what Kaito helped Riku understand. That awareness itself has no form, cannot be seen in any mirror, cannot be captured in any reflection. It is what looks, not what is looked at. What experiences, not what is experienced. And this awareness is what you most fundamentally are. Not your body, though you experience having a body. Not your thoughts, though you experience having thoughts. Not your emotions, though you experience having emotions. You are the awareness in which all of these things appear, the space that holds all experience. The consciousness that knows body, thoughts, emotions, but is not limited to any of them. When you identify primarily with your body, with your appearance, you create suffering. Because bodies change, age, become ill, eventually die. If you believe you are your body, then these changes feel like threats to your existence, like you are diminishing or disappearing. And this creates fear. When you identify with your thoughts and emotions, you create suffering. Because thoughts and emotions are constantly changing, unstable, unreliable. If you believe you are your thoughts, then when difficult thoughts arise, you feel defined by them. When emotions surge, you feel overwhelmed by them. You have no stable ground. But when you recognize yourself as awareness, as consciousness itself, something shifts. Bodies still change. Thoughts still arise. Emotions still move through. But you are not threatened by these changes, because you recognize that you are not the changing content. You are the unchanging awareness that witnesses all content. This does not mean you stop caring for your body or ignore your thoughts and feelings. Your body is the vehicle through which you move in the world. Your thoughts and emotions are part of your experience, but you hold them differently, not as your identity, but as part of what you experience. Like the musician is not the flute, but plays the flute. You are not the body, but experience the body. This understanding brings a quality of freedom. When you stop believing you are the reflection in the mirror, you stop suffering over the reflection. Your face ages. So what? The awareness looking through the eyes does not age. Your body changes. So what? The consciousness experiencing the body does not change. Your thoughts are sometimes disturbed. So what? The awareness that knows thoughts is never disturbed. Riku's clouded mirror showed something important. That clear reflection creates the illusion of fixed identity. You look at a sharp image and think that is solid reality. But actually, you are always changing, always in flux. The sharp mirror lies by suggesting stability. The clouded mirror tells truth by showing approximation. In Zen Buddhism, this insight about the nature of self is foundational. You are not a fixed thing, not a solid entity. You are more like a process, like music arising from many conditions, or like a river that appears continuous but is actually always new water flowing. The form continues, but the content is always changing. And beneath both form and content is the awareness that knows them. That awareness is what you most truly are. This is not a belief to adopt. It is something to investigate directly. Look for the self you think you are. Where is it located? In your body? Which part? In your brain? But you can observe your thoughts, so you must be something other than thoughts. In your feelings? But you can notice feelings arising, so you must be something other than feelings. Keep looking. Keep inquiring. What are you actually? You will not find a solid self. You will find processes, experiences, sensations, thoughts, feelings, all arising and passing. And you will find the awareness that knows all of this. That witnesses it. That is present with it. And that awareness has no form, no face, no solid boundaries. It is more like open space than like an object, more like the sky than like a cloud. When this understanding deepens, when it becomes lived rather than just intellectual, many things change. You take yourself less seriously, not because you do not matter, but because you recognize that the story you tell about yourself is just that, a story, not the deepest truth. Beneath the story is simply awareness, simple, clear, unlimited by any particular identity. The mirror shows a face, but you are not the face. You are what looks through the eyes, what hears through the ears, what experiences this moment. And that awareness was never born and will never die. It simply is, always here, always now, always aware. This is what Riku discovered by making mirrors for 20 years and finally asking what they actually showed. In a town split by a wide river, a ferryman named Masaru had spent 30 years rowing people across the water. His boat was sturdy, his arms strong from decades of pulling oars. He knew every current, every shallow spot, every seasonal change in the river's behavior. Morning and evening, he transported merchants and travelers, farmers and officials from one shore to the other. Masaru lived on the west bank, a simple house near the landing. Each morning he would wake and look across the river to the east bank. Something about the other shore had always drawn him. The way the morning light hit the buildings there, the sounds that carried across the water, the life happening on that far side. He had this thought, persistent and strange, that somehow the East Bank held something he was missing. That over there, across the water, he crossed 100 times a day, was where he was supposed to be, where his real life waited, where he would finally feel complete. It made no sense. He knew the East Bank as well as the West, had walked its streets countless times, had delivered passengers there every day for 3 decades. There was nothing special about it. Just another shore, buildings and people and ordinary life. But still, the feeling persisted, that he was somehow on the wrong side. That crossing the river would finally bring him home. One day, a monk came down to the landing. He wanted passage across. Masaru helped him into the boat and began rowing. The monk sat quietly, watching the water. After they had traveled halfway across, he spoke. "You row this crossing many times each day, yes?" "Every day. For 30 years. and yet you seem to be searching for something. Even now, as you row, your eyes keep moving to the far shore as if looking for something there. Masaru felt exposed. You see clearly, Master. I have always felt drawn to the other side, as if something there is calling to me. Something I need to find. And have you ever gone there to look? I go there constantly. Every time I ferry passengers, I walk those streets. I see what is there, but I never find what I am looking for. So I return to the West Bank, and the feeling remains that I need to cross over, that something on the East Bank is waiting for me. The monk smiled slightly. And when you are on the East Bank, do you ever look back at the West Bank and wonder if what you seek is actually there? Masaru stopped rowing. The boat drifted on the current. Yes. Sometimes when I am on the East Bank, I feel the pull to return to the West. I think maybe I'm looking in the wrong place. Maybe what I seek is actually where I started. So you are always on one shore looking toward the other, always feeling that you need to be somewhere else. That completion is across the water, on the opposite bank. Yes. The monk was quiet for a moment. Let the boat drift. Finally he said, "May I tell you what you are searching for? Please." You are searching for the shore. For solid ground, for a place where you can finally rest and say, "I have arrived. I am home. This is where I belong." But you are a ferryman. You live between shores. You belong to the river, not to either bank. And the river has no solid ground, just constant flow. Masaru felt something stir in his chest, an understanding trying to emerge. You think you will find peace when you finally reach the right shore, the monk continued. But there is no right shore. Both shores are the same, just places you visit briefly before returning to the river. Your home is not on land. Your home is the crossing itself, the movement between, the flow. But I need to belong somewhere, to have a place. Why? The question stopped Masaru. Why did he need to belong somewhere? What was wrong with belonging to the river? With being someone who moved between places rather than someone fixed in one place? I thought, he said slowly, that finding the right place would bring peace. That arrival would end this restless searching. But you have never been lost, the monk said gently. You have always been exactly where you are, rowing this boat, crossing this river, moving between shores. This is your place, not the West Bank or the East Bank, but the river itself, the crossing, the space between. He gestured to the water around them. Right now, you are neither on the West Bank nor the East. You are in between. And this troubles you. You think being in between is temporary, that it is a transition to the real destination. But what if this is the destination? What if the crossing is not the path to home, but is home itself? Masaru looked around. They were suspended over deep water, the West Bank behind them, the East Bank ahead, neither close enough to touch. Just the boat and the river and the sky. And for the first time, he noticed how peaceful this was, how quiet, how complete, not going anywhere, not coming from anywhere, just here in the middle of the river in the middle of the crossing. "You have been looking for something," the monk said, "that you already have. You think peace is somewhere else, on a different shore, in a different life. But peace is here, in this boat, on this river, in this moment of crossing. You do not need to arrive anywhere. You are already here. But I keep feeling drawn to the other side. Keep thinking something is waiting there. That feeling is not about the shore. It is about the belief that now is not enough, that here is not right, that you need to be somewhere else, someone else, something else. But you are already complete. This moment is already whole. The crossing contains everything you need, not because it is special, but because there is nothing missing from this moment except what you imagine should be here, but is not." Masaru picked up the oars again, continued rowing, but something had shifted. He was still crossing the river, still moving from one shore to the other, but he was no longer trying to arrive anywhere. The crossing itself was the arrival. The movement was the destination. Home was not on either bank. Home was here, in the boat, on the water, in the simple act of rowing. When they reached the east bank, the monk stepped out, paid his fare, then paused. "You have been ferrying people for 30 years, helping them cross from one shore to another. But today, you crossed for yourself, not from west to east, but from searching to finding, from restlessness to rest. And you did not have to go anywhere to make that crossing. You simply had to recognize where you already were." After the monk left, Masaru sat in his boat at the landing. He looked at the west bank across the river, the shore where he lived, where his house stood, and he felt no pull to return to it. Not yet. He was here now, on the east bank, and here was complete, was enough, was home. Later, when he did row back across, he noticed something. The feeling of needing to reach the other side was gone. He rowed not to arrive somewhere, but simply because rowing was what he was doing. The boat moved through water. His arms pulled the oars. The river flowed beneath him. And all of this was enough, was complete, was exactly what it was. He understood now what the monk had shown him, that he had been searching for something he already had. That peace was not on either shore, but in the recognition that wherever he was already home. That the restless seeking for some other place, some other moment, some other state, was what kept him from experiencing the peace that was always available right here. Years passed. Masaru continued ferrying people across the river, but he no longer lived in longing for the opposite shore. He lived in the crossing itself, in the simple present moment of being exactly where he was, rowing when rowing, resting when resting, on the west bank when on the west bank, on the east bank when on the east bank. Each moment complete in itself, each place home, because home was not a location. Home was the recognition that he was always already where he needed to be. This story of Masaru and the river speaks to a pattern that creates much of human suffering. The belief that peace, fulfillment, completion, these things are somewhere other than here, that you will find them when you reach some other shore, when circumstances change, when you achieve something, when you become someone different. But all this searching for the right shore keeps you from recognizing that you are already home. Masaru spent 30 years crossing the same river. He knew both shores intimately. Yet he always felt that peace was on the other side. When on the west bank, he longed for the east. When on the east bank, he longed for the west. He was always somewhere, looking towards somewhere else, believing that somewhere else held what here did not. This is the human condition. You are here, now, in this life, in this moment. But you believe fulfillment is somewhere else. In the future, after you achieve your goals. In the past, when things were different. In some other place, some other circumstance, some other version of your life. And this belief keeps you from recognizing that what you are searching for is not absent. It was never absent. You simply were not looking at what is actually here. Zen Buddhism teaches that this searching is based on a fundamental misunderstanding. The belief that now is not enough. That here is incomplete. That you need to get somewhere else, be someone else, have something else before you can finally rest. But this belief is false. Not because you will eventually reach the right shore and find what you seek there, but because there is no right shore. Both shores are equally home. All moments are equally complete. Peace is not a destination. It is recognizing where you already are. The monk's teaching to Masaru was direct. You are searching for what you already have. The searching itself is what keeps you from recognizing it. When you stop looking for peace somewhere else and simply notice what is here, you discover that peace was never absent. It was just obscured by your belief that it had to be found elsewhere. This does not mean your circumstances do not matter. Masaru still needed to row his boat, still needed to eat and sleep and maintain his livelihood. The monk was not suggesting he should stop working or stop having preferences. He was pointing to something deeper, that underneath all circumstances, regardless of what shore you are on, there is a fundamental okayness, a completeness, a home that is always here because it is not dependent on external conditions. When you believe peace depends on circumstances, you become a slave to circumstances. You are always trying to arrange life so that it matches your picture of how it should be. And when life does not match that picture, you suffer. You feel something is wrong. You feel you are in the wrong place. You feel you need to get somewhere else. But when you recognize that peace is not dependent on circumstances, something profound shifts. Circumstances still change. Some pleasant, some unpleasant. But your fundamental sense of okayness is not disturbed by these changes, because it is not based on anything external. It is based on the simple recognition that wherever you are here. And here is always enough, because there is nowhere else to be. Masaru's realization happened in the middle of the river, not on either shore, not at some destination, but in the crossing itself, in the space between. And this is significant, because much of your life is spent in between where you were and where you are going, between what just happened and what will happen next, between who you used to be and who you are becoming. And if you treat all of this in-between time as just transition, as just something to get through before arriving somewhere real, you miss most of your life. The crossing is not less real than the shores. The movement is not less important than the destination. This moment, right now, wherever you are in your journey, is not practice for real life. It is real life. It is the only life there is. And when you can recognize this, when you can meet this moment as complete rather than as insufficient, everything changes. You stop waiting for some future moment to start really living. You stop believing that happiness is somewhere ahead, something you will reach after you accomplish certain things. You recognize that happiness, peace, fulfillment, these are available right now. Not because circumstances are perfect, but because you are here, aware, alive. And that is enough. That has always been enough. This teaching from Zen Buddhism is both simple and profound. Stop searching, not because you have found what you were looking for, but because what you were looking for was never lost. Peace is not absent. It is just obscured by your belief that it should be found somewhere else. When you stop looking away from here, when you stop believing elsewhere is better, when you simply rest in where you actually are, you discover what Masaru discovered. That you have always been home. That the crossing is not leading home. The crossing is home. This moment is not lacking anything except what you imagine it should contain, but does not. Your breath right now. Your body in this moment. The simple fact of being aware. This is not preparation for peace. This is peace. Available always. Here always. Never absent. Just waiting for you to stop searching long enough to recognize it. As you rest now, breathing naturally, these teachings about the nature of self settle into your awareness. You are not what you see in mirrors, not the changing body or the passing thoughts. You are the awareness that witnesses all changing things. And that awareness is not somewhere else, not on some other shore, not in some future moment. It is here, now, always present, always home. This simple recognition is what Zen Buddhism points to again and again. Stop searching. Stop becoming. Stop trying to arrive. You are already here. You have always been here. And here is complete. A farmer named Daichi worked land that his family had farmed for generations. The fields were modest but fertile. Each year he planted rice in the spring, tended it through summer, harvested in autumn. The work was hard but predictable. The land provided enough to feed his family and sell a small surplus at market. The village where Daichi lived depended on the seasonal rains. Spring rains filled the paddies. Summer rains sustained the growing rice. Without adequate rain, the harvest failed. Everyone knew this. Rain was life. This particular spring, the rains did not come. Week after week, the sky remained clear. Daichi planted his rice seedlings as usual, hoping the rain would arrive soon. But the paddies began to dry. The seedlings wilted. Still no rain came. Daichi tried everything he could think of. He carried water from the river, bucket by bucket, trying to keep his fields wet. But it was not enough. The work was exhausting. His back ached. His hands blistered. And still the plants suffered. Other farmers in the village were doing the same. Everyone carrying water. Everyone watching the sky. Everyone hoping for clouds that did not come. The worry was constant. Conversations at the well centered on the drought. When would it end? What would they do if the harvest failed? How would they survive? Daichi found himself consumed by the problem. He woke each morning and immediately looked at the sky, clear again. He worked all day carrying water, trying to save his crop. He lay awake at night worrying about the future. The worry was wearing him down more than the physical labor. One afternoon, exhausted from carrying water, Daichi sat down at the edge of his field. He was too tired to continue, too discouraged to keep fighting. He looked at his withering rice plants and felt defeated. An old woman was walking along the path beside his field. Her name was Ume. She lived alone at the edge of the village. She had farmed once, but was now too old for such work. She saw Daichi sitting there and approached. "The drought is hard," she said, settling herself on the ground beside him. "I do not know what to do," Daichi said. "I work all day and it is not enough. The plants are dying. My family depends on this harvest. But I cannot make it rain." Ume was quiet for a moment. Then she asked, "Are you trying to make it rain?" "No, of course not. But I am trying to save my crop, trying to keep the plants alive until the rain comes." "And is it working?" Daichi looked at his struggling fields. "No, not really. Some plants are surviving, but barely. Most are too far gone. So you are exhausting yourself for something that may not be possible. What else can I do? Should I just give up? Let everything die?" "I am not saying that. But I notice you are carrying two burdens. The burden of the actual work, carrying water, and the burden of believing you can prevent this drought from affecting you. The work is unavoidable. But the second burden, that one you are adding yourself." Daichi felt frustration rising. "So I should just accept that my family will go hungry? That all my work this year is wasted? The drought is here whether you accept it or not. Your acceptance does not make it worse. But your resistance makes you suffer more. You are fighting against something you cannot change. The sky will rain when it rains. Until then, it will not. And your worry does not bring the rain any sooner. But I feel like I should be doing something." You are doing something. You are carrying water. You are doing what is actually possible. But alongside that, you are also fighting reality, arguing with the sky, demanding that things be different than they are. That arguing is what exhausts you. Not just the work, but the refusal to accept what is actually happening. Daichi sat with this. It was true that he was arguing with reality. Every morning he woke hoping the drought would be over. Every evening he felt frustrated that it continued. He was living in constant resistance to what was actually happening. "So what should I do differently?" Ume smiled slightly. "What is the sky doing right now?" Daichi looked up. "It is clear. No rain." "Yes, that is what is true right now. Not what should be true. Not what you hope will be true. Just what is actually true. The sky is clear. The drought continues. This is reality today. And tomorrow? Tomorrow will be what it is. You do not know yet. Maybe rain will come. Maybe it will not. But tomorrow is not here. Only today is here. And today, the sky is clear. But if I accept that, if I stop hoping for rain, does that not make things worse? Does hope not matter? Hope is fine. But notice the difference between hope and resistance. Hope says maybe rain will come. Resistance says rain should be here already and something is wrong because it is not. Hope looks forward. Resistance fights with now. You can hope for rain tomorrow while accepting that today is dry. Daichi felt something shift. He had been exhausting himself fighting against the present moment, against the reality of dry sky and withering plants, fighting a battle that could not be won because reality was already what it was. So I can carry water, he said slowly, without demanding that carrying water should not be necessary. I can work with what is actually here rather than what I wish were here. Yes, the work is the work. Do what is possible. But stop adding the extra weight of insisting reality should be different. The drought is difficult. Do not make it more difficult by fighting against its existence. After Ume left, Daichi sat for a while longer. The sun was warm. The sky was clear. His plants were struggling. These were simple facts, not good or bad, just what was actually here. He stood and picked up his buckets. He would continue carrying water, not because it would definitely save his crop, but because it was what he could do, what was possible. He would work with what was actually here rather than exhausting himself, demanding that something different should be here instead. The drought continued for several more weeks. Then finally, clouds gathered. Rain fell. Enough to save some of the crop, though not all. The harvest that year was small. Daichi's family had to be careful with their resources. They traded labor for food. They relied on community support. It was a difficult time. But something had changed in how Daichi moved through the difficulty. He did not waste energy fighting against what could not be changed. He did not lie awake arguing with reality. He met each day as it was, worked with what was possible, accepted what was not. And in that acceptance, he found he had more energy for the actual work, for the real challenges, for doing what could be done rather than exhausting himself, wishing circumstances were different. The next spring, rain came as usual. Daichi planted his fields again, but he held the work differently now. He knew that next year might bring another drought, or floods, or some other challenge he could not foresee or control. And that was all right. He would work with whatever came, meet reality as it actually was, save his resistance for things that could actually be changed, and let go of fighting against things that could not. This story of Daichi and the drought touches something familiar. The exhaustion that comes not just from difficult circumstances, but from fighting against those circumstances. From insisting that reality should be different than it is. From carrying the double burden of both the actual problem and the resistance to the problem existing. The drought was difficult. Real hardship. Daichi's worry about his family's survival was legitimate. His efforts to save his crop were appropriate. None of this was the problem. The problem was the additional layer, he added. The constant argument with reality. The mental and emotional energy spent wishing things were different. Demanding that the sky should rain. Feeling that something was wrong with the universe because circumstances were hard. This pattern shows up everywhere in human experience. Circumstances arise that we do not want. Illness, loss, disappointment, change. And alongside the actual difficulty of the circumstance, we add resistance. We say this should not be happening. This is unfair. This is wrong. Why me? Why now? And all this resistance creates additional suffering beyond what the circumstance itself requires. Ume's teaching was simple. The drought is here whether you accept it or not. Your acceptance does not make it worse. But your resistance makes you suffer more. This is worth sitting with. When we resist reality, when we fight against what is already true, what do we actually accomplish? Does the resistance change the circumstance? Usually not. Does it help us respond more skillfully? Usually not. What it does is drain our energy, scatter our attention, add layers of mental anguish to actual difficulty. Acceptance does not mean liking what is happening. Daichi did not need to like the drought, did not need to feel glad about it or pretend it was fine. Acceptance means acknowledging what is actually true. The sky is clear. The plants are struggling. This is what is happening right now. Not fighting against these simple facts. There is something here about the difference between accepting reality and giving up on action. Daichi worried that accepting the drought meant he should stop carrying water. Stop trying. Just let everything die. But Ume pointed to something different. Accept what is true and then work with what is true. Not work against it. Not waste energy arguing with it. Just respond to what is actually here. When Daichi stopped fighting against the drought's existence, he still carried water. Still did the work. But he carried it differently. Without the extra weight of resistance, without the constant mental argument about how things should be different. Just doing what was possible with what was actually here. And this made the work more sustainable, less exhausting, because he was carrying one burden instead of two. This distinction appears throughout Zen Buddhism, between accepting what is and becoming passive. Acceptance is not passivity. It is clarity. Seeing what is actually true without the distortion of wishing it were different. And from that clarity, responding appropriately. Doing what can be done. Changing what can be changed. But not wasting energy fighting battles against reality itself. Rain comes when it comes. The sky does not consult our preferences. Circumstances arise according to their own causes and conditions, most of which are beyond our control or influence. We can work with circumstances. We can respond to them. We can do what is possible within them. But we cannot make reality different through sheer force of resistance or wishful thinking. Daichi discovered that acceptance actually gave him more energy for useful action. When he stopped spending energy on resistance, that energy became available for the actual work. For carrying water, for caring for his family, for finding creative solutions. The resistance had been draining him more than the physical labor. There is a kind of peace that emerges from this way of meeting life. Not the peace of everything going well, but the peace of not fighting against what is already true, of working with reality rather than against it, of responding to what is actually here rather than what we wish were here instead. The drought eventually ended, but another challenge will come. This is the nature of farming, the nature of life. Conditions change, sometimes favorably, sometimes not. And each time, there is a choice. Meet what comes with acceptance and then respond appropriately. Or fight against its existence and exhaust ourselves in futile resistance before finally doing what needs to be done anyway. In a small town known for its tea ceremony tradition, a man named Ryota had practiced the art for 50 years. He had studied since childhood, learned the precise movements, the exact sequence, the careful attention required for every gesture. By the time he reached old age, he was recognized as a master. Students came to learn from him. Families requested him to perform ceremonies at important occasions. The tea ceremony required steady hands. Each movement was precise. Pouring water at the right temperature, whisking tea to the perfect consistency, handling delicate bowls with care. For 50 years, Ryota's hands had been reliable, steady, skilled. Then one morning, as he was preparing tea for his morning practice, his hands began to tremble. Just slightly at first, barely noticeable, but enough that a few drops of water splashed outside the bowl. Enough that the whisk moved less smoothly than usual. Ryota paused, looked at his hands. The trembling continued. He tried to steady them through force of will, but that made it worse. He set down the utensils and waited. After a few moments, the trembling subsided. He continued his practice, but over the following days, the trembling returned. Sometimes mild, sometimes stronger, always at unpredictable moments. He would be pouring water and suddenly his hands would shake. He would be lifting a tea bowl and nearly drop it. Movements that had been fluid for decades became uncertain. Ryota felt panic growing. His hands were his livelihood, his identity. He was the tea master with the graceful movements, the perfect precision. What would he be if his hands could no longer perform the ceremony properly? He tried to hide the trembling, gripped utensils tighter, moved more carefully, cancelled practice sessions when the shaking was bad. But he knew he could not hide it forever, and the effort to hide it was exhausting. He had a ceremony scheduled. A wealthy family's daughter was getting married. They had requested Ryota specifically. It was an honor he could not decline. But as the date approached, his anxiety grew. What if his hands shook during the ceremony? What if he spilled tea or dropped a bowl in front of everyone? His reputation would be ruined. He would be humiliated. The morning of the ceremony, Ryota's hands were shaking more than usual. He sat in his preparation room, trying to calm himself. But the anxiety made the trembling worse. His hands would not steady. He almost cancelled, almost sent word that he was ill. But something stopped him. Maybe pride. Maybe the recognition that cancelling now would only postpone the inevitable. His hands were not going to suddenly return to their former steadiness. This was his new reality. He gathered his equipment, prepared the tea implements. His students helped him carry everything to the ceremony location. They had noticed his trembling, but said nothing, just offered quiet support. The ceremony space was prepared. Guests were gathering. The family was waiting. Ryota knelt in the proper position, arranged his implements. His hands were shaking. Everyone would see. There was no hiding it now. He took a breath, began the ceremony. His hands trembled as he ladled water, as he whisked the tea, as he turned the bowl. Every movement that had been smooth for 50 years was now uncertain, marked by this visible shakiness. But something unexpected happened. Instead of disaster, instead of humiliation, there was something else in the room. A quality of attention. The guests were not looking at him with judgment or disappointment. They were watching with a kind of tender awareness, seeing not a master failing at his art, but a master continuing his art despite difficulty, showing them something about grace and perseverance and the courage to continue. One of the guests, an older woman, spoke softly after Ryota had served the tea. "Thank you, Master Ryota. That was the most moving ceremony I have witnessed. We saw not just the perfection of form, but the humanity within the form." After the ceremony, after the guests had left, Ryota sat alone with his trembling hands. He looked at them. These hands that had served him so well for so long, that were now changing, becoming something different. And he realized something. He had been trying to perform the ceremony as he always had, trying to maintain the same precision, the same steadiness, trying to be the master he used to be. But he was not that person anymore. His body had changed. And fighting against that change was creating suffering beyond the change itself. What if he stopped fighting? What if he accepted that his hands now trembled? That the ceremony he could perform now was different from the ceremony he performed 10 years ago? Not worse. Different. Marked by trembling hands. But still a ceremony. Still an offering. Still containing everything essential about the practice. His senior student, a woman named Hana, came to help him pack the equipment. She had been with him for 20 years. She had noticed his struggles over the past months. "Master, may I speak plainly?" "Please. I have watched you fight against your shaking hands. I understand why. The tea ceremony demands precision. But I wonder if you are missing something." "What am I missing?" The ceremony is not about perfect hands. It is about perfect attention, about presence, about meeting this moment with full awareness. Your hands shake now. This is true. But your attention has not diminished. Your presence has not diminished. Your understanding of the ceremony has not diminished. Only your hands have changed. Ryota felt tears forming. But the movements should be smooth, precise. That is what I have always taught. Yes, when smooth and precise are possible, that is beautiful. But when they are not possible, what then? Do we abandon the practice? Or do we find the practice within new limitations? I do not know how to do this ceremony with shaking hands. Then perhaps you are learning a new ceremony. The ceremony of acceptance. Of continuing despite difficulty. Of showing that practice is not about perfection, but about presence. About doing what is possible with what is actually here. Over the following weeks, Ryota slowly stopped fighting against his trembling hands. He did not try to hide them. Did not cancel sessions. Did not grip utensils tighter trying to force steadiness. He just performed the ceremony as he could perform it now. With trembling hands. With less precision than before. But with complete presence. His students noticed something. The ceremonies had a different quality now. less formal, more intimate. There was something human in them that had perhaps been missing before. When everything was perfect, the ceremony could feel distant, untouchable. But now, with Ryota's visible struggle, with his hands shaking and yet continuing, the ceremony felt more accessible, more real. Students who had been intimidated by the precision required found themselves more willing to try. If the master's hands could tremble and he could still perform the ceremony, maybe their own imperfections were acceptable too. Maybe the point was not achieving flawless execution, but bringing full attention to the practice, regardless of how the execution turned out. Ryota realized something profound. He had spent 50 years pursuing perfection in the tea ceremony, and there was value in that pursuit. It had developed his skill. But somewhere along the way, he had confused perfection of form with the essence of the practice. He had thought the ceremony was about precise movements, but the movements were just the container. The essence was something else. Something that remained even when the movements became imperfect. The essence was presence, attention, the quality of awareness brought to each moment, the care taken with each gesture, the respect shown to the implements, to the tea, to the guests. All of this remained even when his hands shook. Was even perhaps more visible now that the distraction of perfect technique was removed. He continued teaching, continued performing ceremonies. His hands never stopped trembling. If anything, they got worse as he aged. But he was no longer fighting against them. They trembled, and he worked with that trembling, found the ceremony that was possible within that limitation. And in doing so, taught his students something deeper than technique. He taught them about meeting life as it actually is, about continuing practice even when circumstances change, about finding what is possible rather than mourning what is no longer possible. Years later, near the end of his life, a young student asked him, "Master, do you wish your hands were steady again?" Ryota looked at his trembling hands, considered the question. "Sometimes," he said honestly, "but these hands have taught me something my steady hands never could. They have taught me that the practice is not the movements. The practice is the presence. And presence is possible regardless of whether hands shake or stay still. I am grateful for what these hands have shown me." This story of Ryota and his trembling hands speaks to something that touches everyone eventually. The changes that come with aging, with illness, with any circumstance that limits what was once possible, and the choice we face in those moments. To fight against the change, to mourn endlessly what is lost, or to discover what is possible within the new limitations. Ryota's identity was built around his skill, his steady hands, his precise movements. For 50 years, these things defined him, made him valuable, made him who he was. When his hands began to tremble, it felt like a threat to his very existence. If he was not the master with perfect technique, who was he? This is the crisis that comes when our abilities change, when our bodies no longer do what they once did easily, when age or illness or circumstance limits us in ways we never anticipated. We feel that we are losing ourselves, that the change diminishes who we are, and we fight against it with everything we have. But fighting against the body's natural changes is exhausting. Ryota tried to force his hands steady, tried to hide the trembling, tried to perform the ceremony as if nothing had changed. And all this effort created suffering beyond what the trembling itself required. The trembling was just a physical fact. The suffering came from his resistance to that fact, from his belief that he should still be who he was 10 years ago. What shifted for Ryota was the recognition that he could not be who he was 10 years ago. That person was gone. His body had changed, and no amount of resistance would change it back. But this did not mean he had to abandon his practice. It meant he had to find the practice within his new circumstances. The ceremony he could perform now, with the body he had now, in this moment that was actually here. Hana's observation was important. The ceremony was never really about perfect hands. It was about presence, about attention, about meeting each moment with awareness and care. The perfect movements were valuable as a form of discipline, as a way to train attention. But they were not the essence. And when they were no longer possible, the essence remained. This is true of everything we do. We often confuse the form with the essence, the particular way we do something with the heart of why we do it. And when the form becomes impossible, we think we must abandon the practice entirely. But often, the essence can continue in a new form. Different, perhaps less elegant, but still containing what matters. Ryota's trembling hands actually revealed something that his steady hands had obscured. The humanity of the practice. The courage required to continue despite difficulty. The wisdom of accepting limitation rather than fighting against it. His students learned more from watching him perform with trembling hands than they had from years of watching perfect technique. Because the trembling showed them that practice is not about perfection. It is about presence, about showing up, about doing what is possible with what is actually here. There is something deeply human in this teaching. We all face limitations, some from the beginning, some that develop over time. Physical limitations, mental limitations, circumstantial limitations. And we have a choice. We can spend our energy fighting against these limitations, mourning what we cannot do, trying to force ourselves back to what was. Or we can accept what is true and discover what is possible within it. Acceptance does not mean giving up. Ryota did not stop performing tea ceremonies. He did not abandon his practice. He found the practice within his new reality. The ceremony he could perform with trembling hands. Not the same ceremony as before, but still a ceremony. Still valuable. Still an expression of the tradition. Just marked now by the truth of his aging body. This is where Zen Buddhism points again and again to the simple recognition of what is actually true, not what should be true, not what we wish were true, not what used to be true, just what is true right now. Ryota's hands trembled. This was simply a fact. Fighting against that fact created suffering. Accepting it created space for a different kind of practice, one that included trembling. That worked with it rather than against it. The guests at the ceremony noticed something moving in Ryota's performance, something they had not seen before, because there was honesty in it, vulnerability, the acknowledgement that even masters age, even skilled hands tremble, and practice continues anyway. Not because circumstances are perfect, but because practice is what we do with whatever circumstances we have. This teaching extends beyond tea ceremony, beyond aging, to every limitation we face, every circumstance that constrains us, every moment when what we wish were possible is not possible. We can spend our energy in resistance, in mourning, in fighting against reality, or we can accept what is true and ask, what is possible here? What can I do with this? How can I practice within this limitation? The trembling never stopped, never went away, but it also stopped being the enemy, stopped being something to hide or fight against. It became just part of the practice, part of what was here. And in accepting it as part of what was here, Ryota found he could continue, different than before, but still continuing, still present, still offering what he could offer, and discovering that what he could offer with trembling hands was in some ways more valuable than what he had offered when his hands were steady. Breathing slowly now, these teachings about acceptance rest gently. The farmer learned to work with drought rather than against it. The tea master learned to continue practice within new limitations. Both discovered that fighting against reality creates more suffering than the reality itself. That acceptance is not defeat. It is clarity, the recognition of what is actually true. And from that recognition, the ability to respond, to work with what is here, to find what is possible rather than exhausting ourselves, demanding that what is impossible should somehow be possible anyway. This is the gentle wisdom Zen Buddhism offers. Not that life should be easy, but that fighting against difficulty makes it harder. That acceptance creates space. Space to breathe. Space to respond. Space to discover what can be done with what is actually here. The stories you have heard tonight are like seeds. Small, simple, planted quietly. They do not need to be remembered perfectly or analyzed deeply. They will work in you in their own way, in their own time, growing into understanding when the moment is right. These teachings from Zen Buddhism are not complicated. They point to simple truths. That peace is found in accepting what is. That presence matters more than perfection. That you are not what you think you are. That holding tightly creates suffering. That resistance exhausts. That this moment, just as it is, contains everything you need. You do not need to do anything with what you have heard. Do not need to become someone different. Do not need to fix yourself or improve yourself or change yourself. The teachings simply invite you to notice, to recognize, to see what has always been here but perhaps overlooked. Your breath has continued throughout these hours, in and out, without effort, without trying. This simple rhythm has been here all along, present, reliable, available, a reminder that life continues, that you continue, that each moment arrives fresh, regardless of what came before. As you rest now, or as you move towards sleep, know that you carry nothing you do not need. The stories are here if they serve you. The teachings are available if you wish to return to them. But you are complete already. Not lacking. Not broken. Not in need of fixing. Just here. Just breathing. Just being. Thank you for walking this path tonight. For listening. For allowing these ancient words to find their way to you. May you rest well. May you wake refreshed. May you meet tomorrow with the same gentle awareness that has been here all along, quiet and patient, waiting for you to recognize it. Sleep well, and thank you for joining us here at Sleepy Monk.